scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy should itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
We've signed a climate convention on the importance of economic instruments and free markets. Were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Let me be clear on one fundamental point. The United States fully intends to be the world's preeminent leader in protecting the global environment.
Coming up, Technocracy News. And greetings from Technocracy News and Trends. Patrick Wood here, Editor-in-Chief. You know, there's been a lot of confusion in the last several years over robots and how many robots it's going to take to displace the majority of human workers in America. Originally, estimates were in the 10% range, then it went up to 20%, then 30%. And as technology has marched on and actual experiences marched on, the estimates keep getting higher. Today's first article has to do with the latest on job replacement by robots. And the title of this article is Top 10 U.S. Cities Most Likely to Lose Jobs to Robots. I wrote at the top of this, percentage estimates of potential human job losses to robots are increasing as technology advances. Two factors will exacerbate this. Recession, that is, devaluing human labor costs, and demographic decline, that is, the decline in population and working age population. This article states the use of robots in the workplace has more than doubled in just 12 years, studies have found. Now a new interactive map provides more detail into this robot exposure by highlighting the top 10 metropolitan areas threatened by this machine takeover. California listed as number 1. In addition to areas most at risk, experts found that automation is displacing younger, less educated, and minority workers at the highest rates. As a side note, we knew that this was going to happen. The entry-level jobs that many people get right out of school, high school, or even college are typically low-paying, low-skill, but they're very important to get people into the workforce. That's where you start. If you don't have a starting job, you can't get an advanced job later on. So this is the area that robots have taken the most advantage of. Those are the jobs, of course, that are the simplest to do. The article continues, the study and map were developed by the Century Foundation, a progressive think tank headquartered in New York City, which looked across more than 250 metropolitan areas to understand this robot intensity. Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Santa Ana, California, were ranked number 1, followed by Chicago, Naperville, and Joliet in Illinois. Dock workers in Los Angeles have been recently replaced by unmanned electric vehicles to transport shipping containers around the largest port in the U.S. It was once done by humans in diesel trucks. And many manufacturers in Chicago are adopting machine help over human workers. Coming in at number 3 is Houston, Baytown, and Sugar Land, Texas, then Phoenix, Mesa, Scottsdale, and Arizona. At number 5 is Detroit, Warren, and Dearborn, Michigan, and then parts of Wisconsin like Milwaukee, Waukesha, and West Allis came in at number 6. Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, Camden, New Jersey, and Wilmington, Delaware share the number 7 spots. And areas of California again make the list at number 8, and Indianapolis, Indiana, listed as number 9. And the 10th metropolis area affected by a robot takeover is Cleveland and El Rio, Ohio. We are not the first to examine the impact of robots on labor market outcomes. The authors of the report share, the first generation of studies estimate the risk or chance that automation displaces workers. Several studies predict that over the next 2 decades, now here's the big number, 45% to 57% of U.S. and OECD workers will be at risk of losing their jobs to automation. That is the latest estimate now. If we average that out, we're looking at 50% displacement of human workers. That's very serious, obviously. It will disrupt the job market. It will disrupt society, as a matter of fact. There's lots of things that could weigh against it to kill the trend. If a recession is deep enough, then companies will simply go out of business and the robots will be taken to the landfill. But if we experience a mild recession, that will have a tendency to drive people out of the market and machines in. Of course, machines sometimes can do things cheaper and more efficiently than humans. And that's what they're banking on when they invest in robotics. The next story may disturb you a little bit depending on who your bank is, but banks are now figuring out how to sell your transactional data for money. There's big bucks in data. I wrote here, if data is the new oil of the 21st century, then banks have more than anyone else on your purchases, travels, habits, etc. Now they're figuring out ways to sell your data to the highest bidder, paying you nothing in return. Of course, this is a huge violation of privacy, and they're looking for every way possible to get around those charges. I expect they will win in the end because they have all the money, and he who has the money gets to make the rules. Well, this article states there's a powerful new player watching what you buy, so it can tailor product offerings for you, the bank behind your credit or debit card. For years, Google and Facebook have been showing ads based on your online behavior. Retailers from Amazon to Walgreens also regularly suction up your transaction history to steer future spending and hold your loyalty. Now, banks too want to turn data they already have on your spending habits into extra revenue by identifying likely customers for retailers. Banks are increasingly aware that they could be sitting on a goldmine of information that can be used to predict or sway where you spend. Historically, such data has been used mostly for fraud protection. Quote, 10 years ago, your bank was like your psychiatrist or your minister. Your bank kept secrets, close quote. Suppose you were to treat yourself to lunch on Cyber Monday, the busiest online shopping day of the year. If you order ahead at Chipotle, paying, of course, with your credit card, you might soon find your bank dangling 10% off lunch at Little Caesars. The bank would earn fees from the pizza joint, both for allowing the offer and processing the payment. Wells Fargo began customizing retail offers for individual customers on November 21st, joining Chase, Bank of America, PNC, SunTrust, and a slew of smaller banks. Unlike Google or Facebook, who try to infer what you're interested in buying based on your searches, web visits, or likes, banks have the secret weapon in that they actually know what we spend money on, said Silvio Tavares of the trade group Card Links Association, whose members help broker purchase-related offers. It's a better predictor of what we're going to spend on, he said. While banks say they are moving cautiously and being mindful of privacy concerns, it's not clear that customers are fully aware of what their banks are up to. Banks know many of our deepest, darkest secrets. That series of bills paid at a cancer clinic, for instance, or that big strip club tab that you thought stayed in Vegas. A bank might suspect someone's adulterous affair long before the betrayed partner would. 10 years ago, your bank was like your psychiatrist or your minister. Your bank kept secrets, said a consumer advocate at the U.S. Public Interest Research Group. Now, he says, they think they are the same as a department store or an online merchant. The startup company Cardalytics, one of the field's pioneers, runs the offer programs for Wells Fargo, Chase, and other banks. Through these partnerships, Cardalytics says it gets insights on about $2.8 trillion worth of annual consumer spending worldwide. So there are your main banks, by the way, that are involved with selling your data and helping other companies figure out ways to fleece your pocketbook. And it starts out with Chase Bank, Bank of America, PNC, Wells Fargo Bank, all the biggies are doing it. And they say there's a slew of smaller banks. So if you bank at a smaller bank, you might want to check and find out if your bank is selling your data against your knowledge and or will, and complain at least. These banks really do think that they have the right to sell your data, obviously. Unless you gave them specific permission to do so, they're really not allowed to do it. Our last story is going to concern finance and industry as well. The title of this story is Western Tech Giants Propping Up China's Surveillance State. We knew instinctively, perhaps, that this was always the case, but now we have some evidence to that case. We've known that Google, for instance, has had a long relationship with China. They keep saying that they're not going to have anything to do with it, and then all of a sudden we find out, oops, still got some offices over there. Or, oops, they're still involved in a joint venture developing AI software for them. Well, now we know that the web is larger than that. I wrote in this article, Western firms have long served as prostitutes for tyrannical governments such as the Bolshevik Revolution in World War II and the rise of Hitler in World War II. That big tech is now supporting China's technocracy shows that they are birds of a feather. The late Antony Sutton documented Wall Street's nefarious affairs with despotic entities in several books. The first, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. Secondly, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. Third, National Suicide. And fourth, The Best Enemy Money Can Buy. These books are still available, by the way, on the internet, on Amazon, for instance, and other rare bookstores. If you want to find out chapter and verse of what the titles mean, Antony Sutton spared no effort at getting details that nobody else was willing to go dig for. And he wrote them down in these books. I read them. You should too. This article states a bombshell follow-up report to a major document leak which confirmed and detailed China's vast Muslim Xinjiang prison network and system for monitoring communications and whereabouts has named names. Names, that is, of U.S. tech giants that are actually aiding and abetting China's multi-billion-dollar surveillance industry being used to impose a total electronic police state on the communist country. And it's not just Google and IBM, but a growing list of recognizable names. Quote, U.S. companies including Seagate Technology, Western Digital Corporation, and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise have nurtured, courted, and profited from China's surveillance industry, the scathing report begins. Several have been involved since the industry's infancy. And let me pause to state here, Hewlett-Packard is one of the original companies represented in the Trilateral Commission when it was founded in 1973. David Packard, in particular, one of the co-founders of HP, was a founding member of the Trilateral Commission. They enjoyed tremendous benefits when China was brought into the world stage by Zbigniew Brzezinski, the actual co-founder of the commission, along with David Rockefeller. And HP enjoyed a very special relationship with China because they were teaching them about technocracy. And of course, technology and technocracy go hand in hand. So HP has made a fortune over the decades dealing with China. The fact that they would finally show up on somebody's radar is no surprise. The article continues. These American companies gained greater scrutiny after the U.S. Treasury recently targeted up to 8 Chinese surveillance companies, blocking their ability to export U.S. technology through which they could help the Chinese state in committing human rights and individual privacy violations. This included a federal ban on U.S. agencies purchasing video surveillance equipment manufactured by Daiwa, Hikvision, and Hytera Communications. American companies over recent years have competed to enter China's booming $10 billion plus surveillance market and also take advantage of Chinese companies' rapidly progressing technology. Stunningly, the Wall Street Journal investigation finds that, quote, of 37 Chinese firms singled out last November by the Beijing-backed China Security and Protection Industry Association for outstanding contributions to the country's surveillance industry, 17 have publicly disclosed financing, commercial or supply chain relationships with U.S. technology companies. And further, several of those firms had multiple connections. demonstrating the indirect relationship between U.S. companies and Chinese state surveillance via the Wall Street Journal, quote, Hikvision, China's largest surveillance systems maker, has bought technology from U.S. firms directly and through third parties. Hikvision was placed on the U.S. entity list in October, limiting some of the technology it can buy from U.S. American companies, said they comply with the law and export rules, and declined to comment on whether sales continue. Well, as long as they can make a buck at it, of course the sales will continue. The article continues. For example, the report details Hewlett-Packard Enterprises owns 40% of new H3C technologies. This Chinese company is well known as providing internet control systems to Chinese security services. According to company marketing materials, one end customer for its switches is Aksu, a Xinjiang city that conducts broad surveillance of residents in public spaces. Satellite images suggest the city is home to multiple internment camps, the report concludes. Well, this is an article that you definitely should read, and again, you might want to print it, save it in a file in case it ever gets ripped off the internet. But we're not surprised that birds of a feather flock together. Technocrats in both countries have no problem working with each other because they believe that they have some right to do so in spite of home rule governments that might say otherwise. But companies like Seagate and Western Digital and Hewlett-Packard have no interest in serving just one master, that would be the United States. They got their start here. In fact, they were instrumental in building the entirety of Silicon Valley. But soon after that, they decided that America was just too small for them, and they weren't going to limit themselves by arbitrary political systems that would deny them the right to do what they want to do, namely to invent things, to create technology that would ultimately control society according to the science of social engineering. That was the original technocrat goal back in 1932, and it is the technocrat goal today, the science of social engineering. And this is what all these companies collectively are doing. So it's no wonder that all of this technology eventually will come back to the United States, even if it was illegal when originally developed and sent over to China. It will be broken down and snuck back in, and eventually the legal barriers will be broken down in America, and this very same technology will be implemented here in the very same way. Americans will never know what hit them. By the time they wake up and realize that there's cameras everywhere, that AI is sniffing out everything they do, everywhere they go, their thought patterns, their propensities, their tendencies, their psychographic profiles. By the time they have it all, it will be too late. I can only hope that more Americans will go to citizensforfreespeech.org and get on board and make their voices known in their own communities. It's not too late to do that, and it's not too late to educate people on what's going on. I'm Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. See you next time.